So welcome back. In this tutorial series, before we actually jump into the texturing aspect of this 3D model of R2D2, we're going to do something called creating an ambient occlusion map. What is an ambient occlusion map if you've never actually played with it? An ambient occlusion map is a texture that is created that recreates the basic lighting conditions for your model that's going to give it basic shadow and light information that when you use it to overlay on top of your texture, it helps give your model a little bit of definition and a little bit of faking some sort of sense of light and depth within your model. So before we do that, first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that your model has already been completely unwrapped, which is what I did with mine. As you can see, I took the unwrap that I was working with in the last tutorial series and actually took it and tightened it up and fit it all within the spaces. So like that, if you have a decent unwrap with no overlaps, which is important, whenever you bake the lighting for your model, it means that it's going to be without errors and such. So this is going to be when it comes to creating an ambient occlusion map, one of these processes that sometimes takes a little bit back and forth. But hopefully this tutorial series will give you an idea of how you do that. So the first thing you're going to do is after you unwrap your model, you have to make sure that all the meshes you're going to be working with are selected. So I am going to do that. First, I'm going to exit edit mode, and I'm going to make sure that everything is selected, which as I can see it is. And then the next step you're going to do is you're going to go into your UV editor. And within your UV editor, let's see, I think I can just go into edit mode with this to see what I'm going to do. Within your UV editor, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set up the location where you're going to bake your texture to. So to do that, you're going to go up here, right here on new, click on it, and I'm going to work on 248 by 248 because that's the resolution I want to give it, a little bit more quality. 124 is probably a little bit more lower performance, but in this occasion 248 by 248 works for me, just for its demonstration purposes. And I'm going to change it to R2 underscore AO or N underscore ambient, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. So whenever you do that, you have to make sure that your alpha is clicked because that's going to be your background, which is going to be transparent or black, and in this case it's going to be transparent. So the only thing you're going to be rendering to is the areas of your texture of your model that have been unwrapped. So when I do that, I'm going to hit OK, and as you can see, it's changed it, and you can see now the effect that this texture has on this background and such. So after I have done that, I am going to go into the shading aspect of Blender because we have to set up the location where this is going to bake to within shading. So up here in the menu, we have shading. And when it does that, as you can see, it opens this menu right here, which has the location, this one that says Principal BSDF. That's the material that's currently, well, this is the area in the materials where you change all the material properties, but you don't have to worry too much about this. And this right here, I don't need, so I'll get rid of it. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is when you go into shading and such, you're going to create the location in the shader where it's going to actually select this mesh and use it for baking purposes. So to do that, I am going to go ahead, press Shift A, and under Images, Texture right here, I'm going to do Image Texture. I'm going to add that, and as you can see, this created a location where I'm going to be adding that texture that I just added in the UV editing menu. So if I go here to New and no, sorry, not that. If I go here to search, as you can see, they have one right here called R2 Ambient. That's good. I click on that. So with R2 Ambient selected, that means now I have the location within the shader that the rendering is going to be made to. So now that that's done, I'm going to select, I've selected my image. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go right here to my render properties. And if you see this to the right here, the render properties, the little camera, they have something here called sampling. And sampling that's the amount of resolution that your light bake is gonna take. So in this occasion, I want it to be a little bit nicer quality, so I'm gonna go ahead and bump that up to 512. You can change it, of course, by values of 2, 512, 124 by 124, 248, but in this occasion, 512 is pretty good for what I'm gonna be using it for. And then after I raise the render samples of that, if you see right here up ahead, I have it says render engine, and I'm going to change that from AV, which is the built-in renderer within Blender itself, and I'm going to change it to cycles, which is the renderer that you're going to use to be able to render your image. So if this is depending on the size of your image, it could be that you need to change how your computer renders this. So you could do the CPU or the GPU, but for me the CPUs work quite fine, so I'm going to leave that because the rendering time is not too much. So after I have done that, I am going to go to my viewport right here and go to UV editing so I can see the result of what I'm going to bake. And then once I have that open, then I am going to go into the render properties right here, scroll down towards the bottom. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. I'm going to go right here to object data properties. So no, it's actually going to be right here in the render properties. If you see something right here that says bake right here, I'm going to expand that menu down. And as you can see, we have a lot of different options within this baking that I'm going to be using. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to change the bake type from combined to ambient occlusion. And then once I've selected ambient occlusion right there, that means it's just going to do purely a light bake. And then the output right here, this margin is how much your baking is going to bleed. So whenever you are baking something, you can choose how much the light or the whatever you bake is going to bleed outside the constraints of the UVW map. In this case, 16. If I do that, all these little pieces right here that are placed so together are going to bleed over into each other. So I'm going to actually go ahead and take that and lower down to 2. Cool. And then once I've done that, I think that should be correct. So what I'm going to go ahead is I'm going to do bake. And it's going to take a little while to do the computation. So I'll pause the video in the meantime, and then I'll resume once it's done. So here we go, bake. And as you can see, it is starting to, right here, you can see the progress of the bake. So I'll go ahead and pause this video and come back and show you the results once it has been finished. So welcome back. As you can see now that the render has gone and done its magic, as you can see now in the UV layout menu right here, it's gone ahead and given me all this nice information, lighting and such. So it will kind of give you an image of sort of the image you're going to create. So the first thing we're going to do is, after I've created my ambient occlusion here, is I need to export it, because that's what I'm going to be used if I'm going to bring it into such a program such as Substance Painter or Photoshop. So I could use that as my initial lighting overlay over my texture. So I'm going to go and do image. And I'm going to do, let's see, is it here? Let's see, it's somewhere right here. Image. And I'm going to do save as. And then when I do save as here, let's go ahead and save it as R2 Ambient, and it's going to save it as a PNG. Save as. Good. So that means it's exported it externally to the place somewhere where I can open it up. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and apply it to the R2D2 model and make sure there's no issues. So I'm going to go and just go pure to modeling so I can actually see what I'm doing. And now that I've turned that off, I'm going to go to shading right here. And if you can see right here, I can select this, and that's going to have the image that I have applied. So if I go in here, for example, and take this and drag it to the base color, as you can see, and there's one problem that I have to help you guys sort out and such. So as you can see, if I exit edit mode, everything, you have lighting information every single place. You have little shadows right around the bottom. Kind of gives you an idea what you can be working with. But now I have one issue right here, and that is in R2D2's main visor. So why is this black? Well, the reason this is black is because it means that this particular piece of geometry has had its normals flipped. So these faces, for some reason or another, are facing inwards. So that means that I'm going to have to correct that issue with this mesh, and then I'm going to have to go and rebake the results so it looks correct again. So how do I do that? I'm going to click off, and I'm going to select on just the one that's the problematic, and I'm going to go into edit mode. And in edit mode, I'm going to hover over that piece that's the problem and click L. And then when I click on that, I right click, and let's see, that is. So yes, once you have that particular problematic piece on your mesh selected, if you go up here in the modeling menu, can you see under mesh right up here, click on this, and you're going to scroll, and you are going to look for one that is called normals. That controls the orientation of what direction your normals are facing. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit flip on these. Hit undo because I accidentally had one place selected. So I'll go ahead and select that again. And again, you go to mesh, normals, and then flip, which means they've been flipped. These faces and the orientation, you can't see it immediately right now, but you'll see it once I get this rebaked. So again, go back to object mode, select everything, and then let's see edit mode so we can see this. Select everything once it's done, and then go back to, again, to your UV editing to see your results. And then you go back to the bake again, and we're going to go ahead and hit bake again and watch it hopefully be fixed. And so when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and pause it, and we can see the results afterwards. So you can see I've accidentally clicked I clicked A to select everything, and I accidentally selected light, so that means that this is not rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and unclick everything and then just click on my meshes, because the bake won't work properly if you have something that's not mesh. So once I have done that, make sure they get the bottom one. So you can see all of it selected now. So again, now that's all of them have been selected, I'm going to go ahead and hit bake. And as you can see, it's starting, and I'll go ahead and pause this and come back to when it's finished. So welcome back. And as you can see now, that error that I had in the visor of R2D2 has all been fixed, which means the orientation of the faces are not facing in the right direction when I do the bake. So as you can see, now I have a very, very basic ambient occlusion map for R2D2 that I'm going to be using as the basis for its texture. So now that we've gone ahead and fixed that issue, we want to go ahead and export those UVs again. So I will go into edit mode, and I'm going to go ahead and export that image again so we have it saved, our fixed ambient occlusions. So to do that, we're going to go to image, we're going to do the save as, and again, save over your old one, ambient occlusion PNG, save. Cool, that's done. And then we have one more thing to do before we head into the texturing aspect of these tutorials, and that is to render a template of this, which is basically to render the shape of the UV template here in wireframe that we're going to use as an overlay within Photoshop to be able to have an idea of what pieces you're working with and to have some sort of an idea of how everything is separated. So I'll go ahead and show you how that works. So I will go to the UVs right here, and then if I go to UV up here, export UV layout, that means it's going to give me an export of my UVs, and I'm going to go ahead and save it to R2D2 template, or whatever you want to save it, which is something you're going to bring into Photoshop and such. And this right here, fill opacity, is something that's turned all the way into 0.23, which means how much you're going to be able to see this. I wanted to see it completely entirely, so I've turned this up all the way to 1, because if you leave it too low, this value, you don't see anything in your image. So I'm going to leave that to 1. And I'm going to hit export layout, and I will see you in Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and as you can see, the first thing that I've opened up is the ambient occlusion map that I've actually baked and such, which gives me all of the lighting information for this R2D2 mesh. And this is right here what you're going to be using as your basis for your texture, whether it's going to be within, whether you're going to texture it in Photoshop itself or take it into a program such as Substance Painter. This is what you're going to use as the basis, the starting off point within your mesh to give you some sort of basic light information. And the other thing that I baked is that template right here, and as you can see here, this is what I'm going to be using to give me sort of a guidance when I'm texturing. So let's go do a quick setup for this texture to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to create a new layer, I'm going to swap it with the ambient occlusion, and I'm just going to make this basic white so you can see the effect, fill that in. So you can see how that looks now. You can, oh, sorry, had it set to black, it should be white, boop. And as you can see now, this one right here from normal, I'm going to take this and make it to multiply so you can get some of that lighting detail. And you can paint colors below it and such when you start doing the texturing within Photoshop. And if I take this right here, template, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to bring it within Photoshop and paste it above. And this is probably going to be the layer that you're going to see above everything and such. So let's see if that's paint. Yes, that's pasted correctly. And if you see what I'm going to do with this now, I am going to set this to multiply. When I have it set to multiply, as you can see, this lights up all of my pieces to see what I'm working with, and it'll give me an idea of where everything lies if I need to paint on things individually. It's not a big issue with Substance Painter because you just paint it there and it appears there. But if you're going to do, it could be that It doesn't necessarily mean that every job you're going to go to is going to have substance available to you. So if you're going to do texturing, you have to learn to do it both by hand within programs like Photoshop, because it could be that if the company doesn't have it, then you're going to have a problem if you don't know how to texture traditionally. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that. We're probably going to see each other again in the texturing aspect of these tutorials. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, just find me on Zoom and I will help you out. Peace.